full training camp as the head coach. Because I think when you look objectively at the situation that Tiago inherited, he came here to be an assistant coach, and then on the second day of the season, the head coach was arrested by the FBI in the middle of the night after the season opener, and Tiago suddenly was like, okay, well, I'm the head coach now. I guess, cool, okay. So between that and, the amount of injuries they've had, like I said, with Scoot being out for most of the season before he came back, Drew Holiday missed a couple of months, Jeremy Grant missed a bunch of time. They pretty much have had guys in and out the whole year. And despite all of that, they are currently have 40 wins. So they're going to almost definitely finish at or above 500. They're going to be in the play-in. Objectively, you can look at it and say Tiago's done about as good a job as anybody could do given the circumstances. So if they wanted to bring him back, I think that would be a very reasonable decision to make. But I just have the wild card here is the new owner. And I have no idea what the new owner is going to do. We asked him about it at the press conference that they had to introduce him the other day. And he basically said, Tiago's done a really good job, and I'm curious to see where this goes because my expectation is to win. So that makes me think that if the Blazers get through the play-in and make the playoffs, then there's a good chance that Tiago will keep his job. And if not, then maybe there's a chance that the new owner says, okay, we're going to go in a different direction. I think that probably the most likely thing that happens is they don't make a decision right at the beginning of the offseason and they go through a process and interview head coaching candidates, and Tiago is a candidate in that coaching search where they're considering keeping him and he's in the mix, but they're also talking to outside candidates because the Blazers haven't had a real coaching search as an organization since 2012 when they hired Terry Stotts, because when they fired Terry and they hired Chauncey Billups, that was like the fakest coaching search process of all time. Neil Olshey was always going to hire him, and the Becky Hammond thing was like a PR makeup call when people started getting mad about Chauncey because of the sexual assault allegation. Like Chauncey was the only one that was ever going to get that job. Everything else was just, performative. So the Blazers as an organization haven't had a real coaching search in 14 years at this point. So even if they do ultimately decide to keep Tiago around after this year, which I think he's done a good enough job to deserve a shot, but I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world to at least also look around and talk to people from outside the organization and interview different candidates and just kind of see what's out there, because the Blazers haven't done that in a long time.
Definitely. And from the way it sounds is that unless like a big name hire was able to walk through that door, because I know Tom Dundon, right? Is that how you say his last name?
Dundon, yeah.
Has done a good job of creating a winning culture with the hockey team that he bought. As from my recollection, they were actually a bottom tier team, and then he took and he was able to flip them around, and he's made seemingly good decisions as an owner, or at least willing to trust the people who he put the decisions in their hands and whatnot. Could you see it that, probably that Tiago is just gonna, as like I said, as long as it's not a big fish becomes available that wants to be there, or Dame proclaims for somebody specific, that especially that Joe Cronin brought the guy from Paris basketball. It's kind of a Tomas Isalo situation.
Yeah.
Where like,
I think Tiago's done a better job than Tomas Isalo.
Oh yeah.
Well, and I think the difference between the two of them is that Tiago is a former NBA player who played for Pop and won championships. So like, he's a guy that players respect. Like he has that kind of former, like he is like a Paris basketball, like EuroLeague, whatever, but he's also a former player that, players can relate to, and he's relatively young. So like, that's kind of the difference between him and Isalo, even though they came from the same team in France.
Yeah, and what I really meant by that was I think they paid a decent bit of money to bring Tiago. He wasn't like a cheap assistant to put on the bench. It was almost like they put him on the bench, similar to how Brian Keefe, when Wes Unseld had his final season, where like it almost feels like there's preemptive. They want to have a guy there if anything happened. Not that they knew this was going to happen with Chauncey, but like it felt like Chauncey was going to be shown the door regardless of, unless they had an incredible season that they went on a run that he's seen. I felt like if they didn't overachieve, his days were numbered for this team. And what's your thoughts on that? Besides that, Do you think they're just waiting for, I guess, the court stuff to settle to formally fire him?
Well, I don't agree with you at all, first of all, that Chauncey was on the hot seat at all. Like his contract was up after last season. They could have just easily said, okay, contract's up. We're going to just go in a different direction. And that's what, until maybe the last 2 weeks of last season, that's what I think everybody, including me, thought was going to happen. And then they were going to do a search and they were just going to do something else when his contract was up. But because they had the second half of the season that they had, and they made this play-in push when everybody thought they were going to be one of the worst teams in the NBA and going after Cooper Flag in the lottery, he ended up getting an extension. And that opening game of the season, the night before he got arrested, they lost that game to the Timberwolves, but they looked really good. And all of the stuff that Chauncey had been talking about the identity and about, the way he wanted them to play, that was all there, even though they lost that game. So I think Chauncey was even with the new ownership group coming in, the thing about Chauncey is that he's really good at managing up, and he's really good at kind of, dealing with management and also dealing with players. And like, I think Chauncey, if the gambling scandal, whatever, hadn't happened, I think Chauncey would be way more safe than Tiago is right now. Because I think Chauncey is somebody that up until this whole thing happened, he was somebody that players respected. He was somebody that players listened to. He was somebody that players, bought into. And he was somebody that everybody, in the front office had, a comfort level with. Like, I think Chauncey was going to be around for the long term if this thing hadn't happened. Now, as far as what the future is with him, I think, yes, you're right that they can't really do anything until we see what happens from the legal standpoint, because they, obviously, even if he's somehow found not guilty, if he's cleared legally of all these charges, he's never coaching in the NBA again. Like, that's just not tenable at all. But if, the trial as of right now is supposed to start on November 2nd. And with a trial like this, apparently the government has terabytes of evidence against all the defendants. And so it's not a trial that's going to be done in a week once the trial starts. Like, once the trial starts, it could take months or years for it to get resolved. So it's a possibility, if it actually goes to trial and goes through the whole legal process, that Chauncey is just going to be in limbo and their hands are going to kind of be tied legally from doing anything with his status for several years. I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen, because I think the FBI has a good enough conviction rate that most of these cases never really go to trial, and all the defendants usually just do some sort of plea agreement before it even goes to trial. So there's a possibility that Chauncey agrees to plead guilty in the next few months and avoid jail time. And, and if he actually pleads guilty, if there's something that happens legally that has his status changed to guilty, then the Blazers can just void his contract and fire him for cause and just get out scot-free. And so if that happens, then that's going to happen. But if they try to fire him now without a legal, without him being convicted of anything, right now, all this stuff with the poker games and all that stuff is just allegations right now that hasn't been proven one way or the other in court. And so if they try to fire him now, right now he's on unpaid leave. But if they fire him now and then eventually he's found not guilty of these charges, then you're probably dealing with like arbitration. You're dealing with like a grievance from the Coaches Association for him to try to get back his money that they paid him while he was on leave. So I think it's just going to be the way it is until there's a change in his status legally. And who knows how long that take. He could decide to plead guilty next month, or the whole case could go to trial and then it isn't resolved for 2 years. Either one is on the table.
I wonder if he could even plead no contest if he obviously works out a deal with the government where he's able to.
That's above my pay grade. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. No, because like that would obviously even complicate things further, because in that case, you're in a situation.
Maybe they do some sort of buyout agreement, or I don't know how that's going to work.
Yeah.
Like I said, Chauncey's never coaching in the NBA again, no matter what. But as far as his status with the Blazers,
yeah,
there's no answers, and then nobody has any answers. I actually asked Adam Silver about that when I talked to him at Board of Governors last week about whether that was a league decision, and he said, I don't know, and I haven't really talked to the team about it. So I think everything is just going to be in a holding pattern until something happens with the court case either way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sam?
Yeah, just like we've been talking about, or kind of teasing the whole show about Tom Dundon. Now that we can kind of start. I was talking to a media member the other night about Tom Dundon, and when he owned the Carolina Hurricanes, or he still does, but The one thing